Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Gilda Hilaire, and I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager at Salesforce. Today, we have a panel of experts ready to dive into one of my favorite features of the Marketing Cloud, Automation Studio. We have Amanda Turner, we have Corinna Cohan, we have Jenna Matson, and myself. And just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel. We will try to address these during the presentation and at the end. We will also send the recording to the webinar and all links to documents mentioned in a follow-up email. So please be on the lookout for that. Now, without further ado, we will get started. I will turn the time over to Corinna.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So we are going to get started right out the box here with a high-level question of what is Automation Studio?
All right. So go ahead, Amanda, you take it.
All right. So Automation Studio is kind of a drag and drop interface within Marketing Cloud where you can either send an email or perform ETL tasks, run a query. You have a number of options. It's not necessarily cross-channel aside from some mobile activities. Go ahead, Jenna.
And it's been around for a long time. Automation Studio was around before Journey Builder, and it's what we used to create journeys in, but we now use it to normalize data. Like Amanda was saying, there's the ETL, extract, transform, and load data is probably the main use for Automation Studio today. And of course, doing automated email sends that and things like that, and query activities, script activities.
All right. So what are some best practices / limits around automation activities regarding runtimes and scheduling automations?
Great. Yeah. So Automation Studio does come with a scheduler. 1 hour is as frequently as you can run automations with the scheduler. You do have quite a few options as far as days of the week and so forth, but you do have limited increments. There was a question about how frequent you can run automations. As a workaround, there is a file drop as well as a few options that I'll let Jenna elaborate on that include using script activities.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you guys see my screen?
I can.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So there are many different ways to use Automation Studio with the script activities, especially. I'm sorry. And we were talking about the 15 minutes, or are we talking about just script activities in general?
Yeah, let's address the timing. So there are a few workarounds where you can schedule, of course, off the hour so that you can kind of loop through automations, but go ahead on the script activity there.
Yeah, so basically, you can create a script activity that will, using WS Proxy or jQuery, or not, excuse me, not jQuery, SSJS, to initiate a activity or initiate one automation to use it to kick off another automation. So say you create a script activity in Automation Studio, and then you tell it that you want it to either create a new automation or just initiate a automation that's already created within Automation Studio. And so you can kind of chain automations together in that effect. There's a couple ways to do that, actually. You can chain automations together with a script activity. You can create like 4 automations if you really wanted to, and schedule them, so that they run apart from one another, basically on an hourly basis. Or you can even get creative, and if you have to like kick off, say you have a couple, say you're in an enterprise account, and you have a couple automations that are in separate business units that are dependent on one another. You can actually you can extract a data extension, transfer it to the FTP, and then use an import activity, use a configure it so not that it's scheduled, but configure it so that it looks for a file that's dropped onto the FTP from one of the child business units or another business unit that you want it to access, or that you want to string the automations together with. And you can pick up that extracted, you just need a single row of data, extracted data that was extracted from another automation, and have it strung together with the next automation using that file listening activity and the starting source. And Amanda, you help me expand upon this. But yeah, once it hears that other file, it'll pick it up and initiate the next automation in the series in a separate business unit.
Absolutely. And just to elaborate there, so you do need the one row of data, but you also should have your column headers as well on the file.
Yeah, absolutely. You need, yes, the headers and the, yeah, to be able to do the import. But yeah, so there's a lot of different ways you can get around the limits with the timing in Automation Studio. That hour time frame doesn't have to be necessarily a hindrance.
Sure. And just to kind of go into the best practices side of things, you'll want to keep an eye on your queries. So there is a 30-minute timeout window there. So when scheduling these, if you want to piggyback, you do need to make sure of how long your queries are running. But just as a best practice, you don't want anything running over 30 minutes. It will time out the automation. Another best practice would be to, of course, set your failure notifications. So once you've scheduled the automation, you do have the option, if you go over to the activity tab, Jonah, it's not populated because we don't have it scheduled. Oh, you do have it scheduled. You're ahead of me. So you can put in multiple email addresses there. We do typically recommend maybe like a group or an aliased email address so that if anyone's out of the office, more eyes are on the failure.
Karina, you're on mute.
I am, thank you. I didn't realize to hit mute, sorry about that. So given the requirement to launch an automation with an API call, how would you approach this with best practices in mind?
So requirement to launch an automation with an API call, using like a script activity. You know, there's a couple different ways you could do that. You could, I mean, that's kind of a broad question. I'm not sure there's really a lot of best practices around that. I mean, just make sure that your script activity, you know, isn't doing a lot of I really don't know the best practices around that, to be honest with you. That's kind of a broad question. I would just, you know, write a script activity with WS proxy most likely, and just initiate the one automation from the other. The only thing that I would watch out for is if you have a query running in your first automation, and it's accessing a data extension that has a couple million subscribers in it or something like that, you might have some issues around timing out from the first automation. So you want to take that into consideration. If you do have any automations that are dependent on one another for querying or for accessing any large data sets, you might want to give them ample time before you try to initiate the next one, so that it completes the activities and they don't overlap one another.
Yeah,
Amanda,
absolutely. And yeah, I was going to kind of go towards timing as well. So the automation will need to be fully completed before you could try to kick it off again with that API. So that could be problematic if you don't pay attention to timing.
Yeah, the APIs do run, WS Proxy is really, really fast. You can create activities, automations, everything, data extensions, using a script activity, and it will complete within seconds. But it might take a little bit, it might take 20 to 30 minutes for the actual queries in that script activity that you've written to run. So take that into consideration if you need to make another external API call. Make sure you're securing your API calls with the proper authentication methods. That would be another call out. But yeah, if you need to make another external API call to another external data set or something like that, just make sure you're done manipulating the data that you need to use in advance before trying to initiate that next call.
Kind of along similar lines, which activities would you use to connect one automation with another, or a daisy chain?
Oh, well, we've talked about that. Yeah.
Yep.
The definitely query. You can query a data extension. Say you want to look for a certain subscriber set, you query a data extension. You can use a file extract, data extract to extract data onto FTP. You can use a file transfer to move data from FTP to FTP, from file location to location within the FTP, so that you can initiate, that chain, that daisy chain, business unit to business unit automation that we were talking about. You could use scheduled. Oh goodness. You could use a API call to initiate an automation. You can use a script activity to initiate another automation, or you can use file drop. There it is. File drop. That's where I always think it's a beacon that sits on the FTP and listens for a specific pattern to be dropped onto a folder that you designate on the FTP, and once it sees that file pattern hit the FTP, it'll do what it needs to do, what you've told it to, past the file drop starting source. Amanda, have I covered them all?
You did.
All right, speaking of file drops, here's a question related to that. This person has two files with the same name, and both files are dropping on the FTP at the same time. They're using a file drop automation to kick it off. Which file will the automation pick and why?
That's a great question.
I don't see where they could have exactly the same timestamp. Typically, if you were to grab two files, they would queue up one after another. So it would take the very first, even if it's a matter of seconds, that the difference between them. So really, what you want to do is create more of a unique naming convention. You could utilize personalization strings to add like your year, month, date, right down to the hour, and I believe seconds as well. Jenna, correct me if
Yeah,
I'm
it
wrong
does
there.
go down to a second, but even second and minute gets a little bit problematic whenever you come to server time, and keeping it at
Exactly. Yeah.
best practice.
But, yeah, it is definitely best practice to use a unique name there.
Right. Is there a time limit for a complete automation flow?
So automations themselves do not time out. So you can keep running them. Obviously, you wouldn't want something to run over more than a few hours. You might then consider breaking things up a bit. I did allude to the fact that your queries do have a 30-minute timeout. I have seen with some very, very large files where the importer can time out. We're talking like 100+ gigs, so that's not exactly in best practice to try to import that. You'd want to break up a file that large. But Automation Studio itself does not time out. Jenny, anything to elaborate on there?
Nope. Yeah, you do have that a half an hour window for the to access a data view or to access data within a data extension when using Automation Studio. But other than that, that's specific to the activities themselves.
And you can always, right on that activity tab in Automation Studio, I'm like pointing your mouse for you, Jenna. You can see your average runtime there. Obviously, we've got 4 seconds because we've got one query, but you can see over the life of the automation if it starts growing in time, you could address that. But it really, you don't want your automations to be running for too long. Keep in mind also, like if you're writing queries or imports, you're hitting that table, and you won't be able to really use that table at that point. So just keep an eye on what processes exactly are hitting what assets within the Marketing Cloud at any given moment.
That's a really good point. If a data extension is being accessed by one automation and then another automation initiates and tries to access that same data extension, you're going to have some issues, if not a failure. So spacing of automations and timing is important. With queries, I have a personal best practice. If a query is taking longer than 10 minutes, I go ahead and break it down. And there are different ways you can break it down. You can break it down by using a mod function in your query, which basically is a division function, which will divide the file into segments. There is a hidden attribute on all data extensions called _custom object key that you can access by using like this right here. You would write your query and break it down with the where clause by accessing the custom object key. That is basically a row number that will allow you to break everything down and break the file apart into 4s. It does index at 0, so you have to take that into consideration. This will actually break your file into 4 parts, not 3 parts, whenever you're accessing it. So, but you can see here in the where clause, you would access the custom object key. You would tell it which percentage to divide that row number by, or the file by, and then you would write 4 queries that would break down your data set into 4. That's probably the most performant way to break down a query that's running long. Another way is to use a date range or some sort of filter on your query to ensure that it doesn't exceed that 10-minute personal limit that I put on my queries. And the reason I do that is for growth and sustainability. So you want your data extensions to grow, hopefully, and your subscriber sets to grow. So this way you don't have to come back and check them every 6 months. You can just let it run. And when you do finally exceed that, when you do finally get a runtime error, you can come in and see that your files have grown and you need to break them down a little bit more.
All right. Are there any tools / scripts to get a list of all dependent objects, activities, and data extensions in an automation?
Yeah. So actually, the data views. I don't know why it's telling me I'm going to time out there, but that's kind of funny. But yeah, so the data views will tell you are all the objects that are available in the Marketing Cloud, that are the engagement objects that are available to you in the Marketing Cloud, or the data views that are available to you in the Marketing Cloud that you can query against. Against all objects, activities and data extensions. Yes, there is a way to do that using WS Proxy. I don't have a example script written out, but you can access, find out which data extensions and activities are being used by a automation using WS Proxy. And I would probably honestly not do that from a script activity in the Marketing Cloud. I would probably just try to do that with a API call in Postman, to be honest with you. But if you need to put it into a data extension, you can do it that way.
Alrighty. Are there any recommendations or best practices around reusing a query activity across multiple automations?
So yeah, you'll need to keep in mind, like I said, the timing of when you're actually querying that table. But otherwise, there wouldn't be an issue in using the same query step. You can set up duplicate activities across automations.
Yep. Yeah, that's precise.
Is there a way to query or look up the average runtime for an automation, and can that value be stored in a data extension?
I want to say
Sorry,
there is.
written to and stored. There we go.
I want to say there is. I want to say that again. That's looking at the automation object on using a API call. But I'm not. I can't confirm that off the top of my head. I have to look into that.
Yeah, within the UI, you do have that average runtime available, though.
But you can see there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Does having old automations running with 0 outcomes cause any issues in the instance?
Yes, you definitely want to keep things tidy. Keep in mind that you're working off of a server, so the more clutter you have, the more things you have running, the more you can kind of bog down your instance.
Mm-hmm. And it, even though it might be returning 0, it might be accessing data extensions or databases that you're using for other processes, and
Right.
they could cause complications with those. Once again, we talked about timing earlier on that, and so if you're even though it's returning 0, it might be trying to join off a data extension, that you're accessing by another process. So.
Yep. And it may be a case that you need to change the schedule. So you do have the option to move more to like a weekly or monthly schedule, so you don't have several days on end where it's returning 0.
Mm-hmm. That's true too. And in that case, you can do a skip.
Mm-hmm.
You can check the.
Absolutely, you can use the validation step.
Yeah,
Or
thank
sorry,
you. There you go.
verification.
Verification step, and this is pretty easy to configure, but it basically it checks to see if the results of that query returned anything, and then it'll skip it'll just kind of stop the automation from going on.
Yep, and it won't officially stop the automation. So there is a stop feature in Automation Studio, but basically it stops for that particular scheduled run, and we'll pick up on the next one.
Exactly. And then you can send yourself a notification telling you that it skipped or not, and whatever. So it's a pretty handy little verification tool, so that you don't so that you can see when those automations start returning 0 on a regular basis. And
I also use the same verification tool for monitoring coupon counts for when they get low within all of my brands and sending myself notifications so that I know when to reach out to my e-commerce team to get more provisioned.
that
That's
is
another way to
brilliant.
use verification, is to actually monitor things that you have critical counts that could affect your customer.
Mm-hmm. This is a handy dandy little activity.
Yep. Yeah, you can do lots of things with it. It doesn't look like it does much, but if you can get creative,
Yeah, it does quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, between this and the distribution list, I have a lot of monitoring emails that go out now that I used to have to create a whole automation for, and instead it just verifies.
Exactly. It's a lot easier nowadays. These activities that they've installed for us are quite nice. Automation Studio is a lot more robust than it used to be.
All right. Will an overwrite query empty a data extension even when the query results in 0 records?
Okay, so if your query results in 0 records, it should overwrite the data extension, shouldn't it, Amanda?
Yep. You'll end up with a blank data extension.
Yep, I do that daily for a few pieces where it's a staging one that I need to clear out each day before it revalidates.
Exactly, and if you do the where 1 equals 0 trick, yeah, you can clear it out by doing like a select all from DE where 1 equals 0, and which is a is something that will never occur. So it will select nothing from that data extension and override it with, and basically clear it out, override it with blankness.
Great. All right, so we're gonna switch over to some Journey Builder with automation questions now. So the first one is how to best use automations for Journey Builder.
Yeah, so typically you would use Automation Studio as basically a scheduler. So you would maybe run your segmentation query or any hygiene events just prior to activating the journey. Those do kind of link up. You have the option within, excuse me, Journey Builder to basically start the journey as soon as that automation is complete. Alternatively, you could work to clean your data for the decision splits within the journey as well, since you can kind of reference outside of your entry within Journey Builder. You can have data staged up and ready to go for that.
All right, is there a performance difference with recurring batch sends in Automation Studio versus using Journey Builder?
So Automation Studio, you will not run into performance issues. You are automating a user-initiated send within the tool. Journey Builder, however, there is a throughput of 2 million email sends per hour per tenant. So you will want to be careful. We do generally, for batch sends, still recommend Automation Studio to most clients. There are use cases where Journey Builder's desirable, especially if you have Google 360 involved. You do get that tracking in Journey Builder. Basically, if you have something time sensitive, we tend to definitely recommend Automation Studio. There isn't a huge upside at this point in using Journey Builder. That is something they're working on. So that is increasing as Journey Builder will eventually be the preferred tool for single sends.
Yeah, but now it's probably easier to do it out of Automation Studio or the Email Studio UI right at the moment, just simply because of the limitations that Journey Builder has for those.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible to place restrictions on who is able to modify a particular journey or automation?
Ooh, that is an admin question. I'm sure there is in the
You can't pick specific ones. You can really just limit it to
the studios themselves.
yeah.
So there is the option to view only. So if you want someone just to view those assets to see what's running and not have access to modify or delete. So those are kind of your three options: view, modify, and delete. So you can get pretty granular, especially with custom roles around that.
Mm-hmm. And you would have to change their user settings, right? Their permissions here. But you can only
you would
allow
need
them
to apply the role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you couldn't do like you couldn't yeah, you couldn't change their restrict them from viewing just as an individual.
Yep. If you need to get down to individual journeys and automations, that might be a point in which you need to look into another business unit. That's a lot of the reason why that's there. The option to have multiple business units is you can control your permissions a bit better that way, especially typically because you're getting into maybe different lines of the business.
So what are some best practices for querying all subscribers?
All right, so all subscribers is actually pretty easy to query. It's a list, it's not a data extension, so that's something to take into consideration. And we've actually already written a sample, and we'll show you how to do that really quickly. Basically, the easiest way to do it is to select the attributes from the all subscribers table that you want to select, which in this case, I wanted to select the email address, the subscriber key, and the current status of the subscriber. We don't keep a lot of information in the all subs table. Usually generally use data extensions to do, or contact data to manage subscribers rather than using all subs. But if you do use all subs, this is how you would do it. You would select the attributes that you need. It is a list once again, so you would tell it from what list you would need to to select the subscribers from. In this case, the list ID is 86636, and you can find that if you go into all subscribers and properties. You can see the list ID is right here. So you'll just need to target, oops, sorry guys, I always do that. You just need to target the correct the correct data source here, and that in this case is _list subscribers, and with the list ID of 86636, which we found over there. Once that query is run, oops, sorry, I should have clicked on through here. You can see I wrote it to another data extension here. Once it runs, it will output all the subscribers in the data extension because I just selected everything with their current statuses. So you can see everyone here is active. We have a very large subscriber set here, but that is how you would do that. You can also target other lists by using the list ID off the _list subscribers attribute.
Great, so we have another subscriber question here. They would like to know the best practices for subscriber management when they need to take into account when working with subscriber creation or update from Automation Studio.
Okay. So first and foremost, I'm seeing that maybe there might be a primary key situation. So you do have your subscriber key that you'll want to delegate, preferably not an email address. And then from there, if you do have relational tables, data extensions, you'll want to make sure that you have a primary key data set across those so that you can use Automation Studio to then query and manage that data.
But it can be a composite key, which is a key that's made up of multiple attributes.
Absolutely.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes it's easier to get a more granular view of your subscribers if you use a composite key when necessary. But keep it easy. Don't string too many attributes together.
Is there a way to use Automation Studio? Work needs to stop sending me messages. All right, is there a way to use Automation Studio to deduplicate for Journey Builder?
Yeah, so the individual email sends within Journey Builder do not have the little tick box like a UI send to deduplicate by email address. So you will want to make sure that you do handle for that within the queries or in your filtering prior to sending those folks into your Journey Builder journey.
Yeah, it's better to massage data or to perform any sort of filtering activities before you enter into a journey on data extensions, if you can.
Can you run AMP script from within Automation Studio?
Absolutely. In a script activity, you can run AMP script, you can run SSJS, you can run WS proxy, which is your SOAP API calls. Yes, by using a script activity, you can run AMP script. There are certain functions that are not available to you that are specific to emails and cloud pages. However, if you want to use it for manipulating data, you can.
Wonderful. Is there a way to learn more about data views or any use cases?
Yes, there is a handy dandy lovely list of data views here. Use cases, I'd say experiment. Once you get to know these data views and after using them and accessing them to to get quick insights into your subscribers and what their current engagement is, because remember, data views are only held for 6 months. That's why I use the tracking extract to go back beyond 6 months. Or is only a view of the data for 6 months. But yeah, read this. We'll pass out this link to this article with the recap video, and so you can read over this on how to use the data views and what's in them. The most frequently used, in my opinion, are subscriber, which allows you to get basically all the subscriber information, their status. It's basically what you can find in all subs. You can get a bounce count, their subscriber key, and their email address. The job data view, which provides the job numbers. Notice there's no subscriber key in here because it's not subscriber specific data, it's job specific data. So you'll need to tie this to your subscriber data with the job ID, and you can do that using the sent event data view, which also has job ID and subscriber key. So you kind of join those together, and then you can even use, then you get down into, once you massage down into or get down into the who received what email on what job, you can get into their engagements with the opens, the bounces, complaints, clicks, unsubscribes.
It's a very handy way to get to engagement. So if you have some sort of segmentation based upon frequency, that would be a good use case. It's when you're dealing within Marketing Cloud, so I mean, you can export it, but when you're dealing specifically within Marketing Cloud, I like to lean on the data views versus pulling reports. So I would query these objects here. Like I said, you can export because obviously you have the option to export a data extension. So you could build a custom report. That's another reason why I've leaned on data views before. Like Jenna said,
reporting is probably the most frequent reason that I've used data views.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot here, and there are different views of data versus just having that flat kind of subscriber-based view. Like Jenna said, you have your job-based and so forth. There's a lot to dig into.
There's even forward to a friend. A rarely accessed one, in my opinion. Not needed very often.
No.
Yeah, I've used forward to a friend more for B2B than I have on B2C, and it was more for transactions when it was a purchasing person was doing the ordering, but they were not the person that actually was receiving the product.
Oh, that's a good use case. Yeah.
Yep.
Very good use case.
Yep, because Outlook breaks it. So that was a way to keep it intact, was encouraging them to use forward to a friend.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't use anything in the tool like I'm supposed to, do I?
No, I think you do. You know, I mean, that's why your use cases are, and they're relevant. You know, I mean, you have some very interesting use cases, Karina.
All right, so here's one. So it's mainly for Journey Builder, but it will help for Automation Studio. So what's the difference between contact data and Journey data, and which one can Automation Studio update to use in Journey Builder?
Can you repeat that? I don't know if it was mine or yours, but
okay. So what is the difference between contact data and Journey data in Journey Builder, and which one can Automation Studio actually update for use in Journey Builder?
So Automation Studio can access both. Contact data is going to be your data that's most often refreshed and accessed. Your journey data is basically locked in. So once you start a journey, the data that's injected in that journey stays exactly the way it is throughout the life of the journey. So like when referencing maybe decision splits or personalization, I look towards contact data as we move along through the journey.
Excellent. Okay, sorry, that was they split it into two parts, but I got both of them. I was just making sure. All right, so what is the purpose of batch ID in the data views, and when should we use it?
That's a great question. So batch ID would probably be used for triggered batches. I have not accessed that attribute very frequently. Do you use that attribute a lot?
I do not.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever used it.
I'm thinking, when would you use it? Because you would use your triggered send activity for that. I think we should defer to Salesforce for that one. We'll get back to you on that one. We'll try to find out the answer for when to use that best batch ID.
That was an excellent question.
It was.
I
Very good
forget
question.
that one is there.
You stumped us.
Oh, and then they wanted to confirm. So even if so it says even if refreshed automation, still the journey data won't change. So I think they're saying that journey data where you're saying it was static, they just wanted to confirm that even if you refresh it from Automation Studio,
Yeah, even if you
Journey
refresh
Builder
it.
will tell
So
you.
yeah, I would look into kind of the high water mark is what they call it. So basically, it's still kind of a snapshot. Even if you refresh it, it's not bad necessarily to refresh that data because you may have reentry selected on the journey. So you would want that contact to be potentially reevaluated. But like I said, once they enter that journey data just becomes a snapshot throughout.
Alrighty. So for people that are just getting Marketing Cloud for the first time, what are some automations that you think are kind of out? What are the ones that you would say are must-haves that you would always include within any account that you were setting up?
Oh man, so I don't like this question just simply because I don't want to limit your ideas. There's not really a set of automations that you should set up whenever you first open an account. I have a personal preference that I prefer using the data views over tracking extracts personally. So the only automation that I set up whenever I open an account is an automation that will extract the data from the data views that I want to keep a history of into a data extension. And I'll set a query that looks for the last week's data or the last day's data, depending on the volume of the account. And have all that data just dumping into some data extract or some data extensions, excuse me, so that if the client should decide to go back and want to look at something, from 2012 or something, if you started that back then, you can access that rather than waiting on a tracking extract. But that's the only one that I like to set up like out of the box.
Yeah, out of the
Really,
box,
the sky's the
typically.
limit.
Yep. Typically, we would set up any recurring segmentation. You want to automate those. You don't have to run it all the time or just before a send. You want to have that data available. If there's another email platform, you'll want to synchronize your unsubscribe status or synchronize it in kind of a different location. But if you need to go platform to platform, you can certainly do that. I mean, other than that, if you have an email that's going out on a regular cadence, automate it.
Mm-hmm. Automate the world. If you can put it in Automation Studio, do it. So if you don't have to hit send on a daily basis, or you don't have to if you have something, if you have an activity that you have to do more than once, automate it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So really, there's not really like a set a set of automations that you need. Every program and every account should be constructed and set up to be customized to your use case specifically, and your use case is going to be different than everybody else's. So.
Absolutely.
Oh, don't think I've asked this one yet. Sorry, I realized I found one that I missed. So what are some best practices / tips for debugging and troubleshooting errors with Automation Studio?
Oh, the error question.
That's why I gasped. I was like, how did I miss this?
I know, right? The error question. Okay, so error reporting in Automation Studio. Okay, so you will get an error in your activity screen that's usually says something like refer to the activity to see the error. It's not very descriptive. If it depends on honestly, what sort of an error you receive, on what sort of an activity you receive as to how I go about troubleshooting it. Obviously, if it's a timeout, error, I would definitely, reduce the size of my queries. Usually that's a query issue, and whenever there's something that's timing out, it's usually a query issue. You won't see a script activity timeout. Say you have a script activity that has a bunch of queries that you created in it. The script activity will complete itself, and if you initiate the queries in the script activity, the activities might time out themselves, which you need to make an API call to see if they actually time out. So there's some ways to to do it using some of the API functionality, But if you ever have a nondescript error here that you don't really have any information around, probably the best thing to do is open a support case and ask them to access the error log and see why that automation failed. Amanda, you have any
I mean,
other?
you could always consult Google too. There's a lot of
Yeah,
resources out there. Automation Studio is not a new tool, so you're gonna find a lot documented by users.
that's a very valid point. If you can avoid, you know, if you can do it yourself and troubleshoot it yourself, definitely do that. Stack Exchange is a great resource. There's the Trailblazer community, and like Amanda said, this is not a new tool. It's been around for a long time. It was Programs before it was Automation Studio, which was in the Interactions tab, and Email Studio, which is not there anymore, but it used to be over here under Programs, and then it became Automation Studio standalone product when Salesforce bought ExactTarget. So there's a lot of resources around this, and there's a lot of experts on this product in particular. So, and you can always reach out to your Email Geek and How to SFMC community, and we'll be happy to help you out there too.
All right, and what recommendations do you have to monitor the health of your automations other than the success failure notifications?
Really, that's the only automated notification outside of the import activity. So the import activity, you can add one email address. Again, I strongly recommend a group email address, especially for that one, since you can only enter one. But otherwise, you really need to lean on your complete and failure notifications of the automation.
You can use an API call to access to see how frequently. I think there's an undocumented REST endpoint that you can use to see how frequently an automation fails or not. And if you set it up properly, you can actually build a dashboard of sorts that can show you when automations fail or complete. But you would have to probably build something in Cloud Pages to do that, or you could or you could run a script activity from Automation Studio that looks at all your automations every day and monitors those, and then triggers yourself an email. So there's a couple different ways you could probably go about doing that. Again, though, you would need probably some
it's custom.
some
You'd need a developer.
support. Yeah, you need some dev support. Yeah, thank you.
How can you see file locations under activities in Automation Studio?
Yeah, so you can actually select that underneath the import file. So I was looking at your screen there. You just happened to drag it over. So within that activity, you do have a drop-down menu of all the previously configured file locations. If you need to add any, you do have to go under administration.
Which is, sorry, and I don't know this part. Amanda's
Data
gonna have to guide me. There you go. Thank you.
Expand that one.
Yep.
There you go. So
yeah,
yep,
file locations.
So from there, you can set up more folders on the FTP site that Salesforce has provisioned, or you can add an external. And yep, you've got all those options there as far as the location types.
Alrighty. We're going to go back to a data extension question that I missed before. If a data extension has duplicate records coming in from a survey and I want to filter out the records into another data extension based off of the recent timestamp, how can I do that? I've used the SQL window function, but it makes the process very slow.
Yeah, sometimes adding a window partition can make it a little bit slower. Have you tried using a subselect and possibly doing that? Let me reread this question, make sure I understand. But yeah, if a Windows function isn't working, try doing a join or a subselect, and you might be able to make it a little bit more performant that way. Again, you can split the query into two if it's running a little bit too slow based on that custom object key that I showed a little bit earlier on. But this is saying, but if you're using a timestamp, honestly, to remove duplicate records, your partition window is your best bet. If it's running too slow, I would use a partition window with the custom object key in your where clause. So partition it down and then split it into multiples. Doing it this way, you're going to have to write a couple extra queries, and it will take a long time. But if you do it that way, you can get little groups of the file and then kind of dedupe it from there. And you might have to run a final dedupe on the entire thing once you get it down to what you need it to. But it will take a long time. I'm sorry about that. And whenever you're running SQL in the Marketing Cloud, you do have to start with the select because you're already in a select statement. So you're already doing a subselect basically. So that's why you have to start with the select. So it is going to be a little bit slower because you're already, you're running in an environment that's been set up for us to be able to access these views more easily. Hopefully I answered that question.
You did. I believe we have gotten through all of our questions today. Do you two have any kind of final tips, tricks, or anything you want to share that maybe we didn't cover, but would be great for people to know?
The sky is the limit with Automation Studio.
Yeah,
Don't limit yourself at all.
I agree. I think we covered some good ground.
Yeah, I do too. And remember, get creative. And if you ever need any help, Amanda and I are both available on Email Geek Slack. We're also available on howtosfmc.com. Karina is there too, and she always has the coolest use cases. So if you're thinking about trying to do something different with one of your programs, tap her. And if you need nuts and bolts, I'm your girl. And yeah, Amanda is the queen of the config. So there you go. But we are always happy to answer any questions you might have, as well as anybody in the How to SFMC community or in the Trailblazer community. This is a great community to be part of, and you will find answers if you need help.
And in fact, they have a How to SFMC chat tomorrow afternoon that if you have any other audience, man, I keep wanting to call Automation Studio Audience Builder today. Can you tell what project I'll be working on today, guys? So yeah, if you have any other Automation Studio or Journey Builder with Automation Studio or Journey Builder, or just Marketing Cloud in general questions, what time is that call tomorrow, Jenna?
It's 1 p.m. Eastern. So what is that? 10 a.m. Pacific. And we are available for an hour, and we just talk all things Marketing Cloud. And like Karina said, we are there to answer your questions, and you can get an invite to that by going to howtosfmc.com and registering for our meetups there.
All right, and then in addition to that, we also will have more information in the follow-up email because next week our product team is going to do a deep dive into mobile push and geolocation. So I hope you guys are ready to fight me in line for lots of questions because I just inherited a push program and I got lots of questions. But yeah, so that is, I guess, yeah, we've gotten everything. We will be sending out a recording. Thank you. I totally forgot to say that at the beginning of this call. But yes, we will be sending out a follow-up email email that has the recording. We can follow up with any other questions that maybe we didn't get to here if I may have missed them. Amanda and Jenna and the rest of our community will be going through the questions just to make sure that if there were any that were missed, that we do grab those and answer them for you. And I guess everybody gets an extra 2 minutes back today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Gilda, for putting this on as usual, and for organizing all the lookup answers and the technical marketing meetups.
Oh, and I do see the Audience Studio lookup session question from Natalie. We will get that on the books, or we will get that at least to where we can find someone to answer some of your questions. Thank you for asking. And we always appreciate if you guys have ideas for sessions or sessions that you want, please either put them here or reach out to us on any of the other channels. But yeah, we love to hear what it is that you want to hear about so that we can find you the people to answer your questions.